have some folks join in, so closer to yes.
Okay. Thank you. I will call to order the December 10th meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission. We're conducting this meeting in a hybrid format, in person and by Zoom. Commissioner Buscarin is here present. Roll call. Yeah,
I'm here. I hear you.
Chair Arthur Gasparo, I'm present, and online we have Commissioner Topham. Could you hear us? Ms. Topham?
She just said I'm here a minute ago.
Okay, so we got a roll call. Commissioners, Planner and Marks will not be present tonight. If you are participating remotely, please use care to mute your computer when you're not mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and identify yourself before speaking. The meeting is being both audio and video recorded. We'll move on to the agenda as published. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, we'll consider that adopted by unanimous consent. And then we have the draft minutes of November 12th and November 25th. Any questions or concerns with those minutes? Hearing none, we'll consider those adopted by unanimous consent. We have to ratify the November 20th warrant. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Okay.
Motion made and seconded. Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Karen?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Public comment for any items not on the agenda? Not seeing any public. We'll move on to pending leases and contracts set forth on Exhibit 1, and I'll turn it over to Manager Carberg.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 3 items for you. The first is a lease amendment with Jim Hagedorn. This is post-survey, which reflects the corrections in square footage for the ground lease for Hangar 10. We have the annual letter of agreement for Airport Council, Anderson and Krieger. And then we had a non-cost change order with Robert B. Auer. It's a time extension only to that contract for finalizing the ramp lighting, noise monitors, and the South Shore fencing relocation. And I recommend approval of all 3.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Is there a motion to approve all 3 contracts?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Karen?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Manager Carberg for the South Apron Ramp Expansion Project update, please.
Okay, thank you. So the electrical connection has been completed and the ramp lights are now commissioned. The noise monitoring systems and the cameras are installed and scheduled for commissioning on December 16th and 17th. We will have a 1-year service contract as part of that installation and for the integration as well, but after that we will have to develop our own contracts with an integrator and with a noise abatement or a noise software provider. After the noise commissioning, I'll have more information about that specific software type, the display, how we're integrating and displaying it with our existing systems. So hopefully we'll have that ready by January.
Super.
For the sound barrier, the design effort has included geotechnical and boring work, and that work is underway this week. We're actually advised on Monday that the boring process itself could be loud, so we sent a ad hoc email to abutters along the west side of the airport. The footings for the wall can be substantial, and I believe the borings extend to a depth of 30 feet. We previously, I think I had previously indicated that the south ramp pavement information would be used for the geotech. And while it's helpful, those borings are only limited to the top 4 feet or so for pavements, so the additional boring work is needed. And then we're going to be working to meet with McFarland Johnson on NGrid to understand our meeting options if there's a solar component. We did discuss this last week, and I'll pick on Rich because he is present. I think one of the action items I was asked for was really just sort of kind of like a yay or nay. Is there really a substantial solar component or output associated with putting panels on this wall? And if not, really to just cut it and finalize design. But if there are indications that it's worth pursuing, my recommendation would be that we continue pursuing it. Rich, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have any advice for us on the power output potential. You're muted, Rich.
Yes, we have a preliminary estimate based on assumed for every 100 square feet of solar panels accounts for 1 kilowatt of photovoltaic power. So assuming we would create, assuming a 1,200-foot wall with solar panels covering 70% of the wall would create 12 kW system. So it's estimated that the wall would offset approximately 16 to 30,000 kilowatts of electricity.
What's the cost of that electricity?
So it would be the cost of whatever you pay for your electricity on the island. I didn't look into that number.
I don't, I would have to pull our overall bill and see what our KW charge is.
Right, in other words, you can't make a decision until you find out, get a dollar figure on that. And it's nice to know what the kilowatts are, but it's
Yep.
meaningless.
Okay, Noah, you and I can work on that.
Yeah,
And if I may, on that estimation of a kilowatt per 100 square feet is based on the vertical shaded and directional exposure of this particular site, or is that just a sort of industry number?
That's just for now. That's just an industry standard. So it could be different, but
I
we'll
mean,
have to look into it some more. But again, we just started looking into this.
what direction does the wall face? About 130, something like that?
This is mostly south, correct? Yeah, mostly south.
southeast.
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 Yeah.
130, something
So-
like that.
And I don't want to beat this here, but I thought we had a pretty good discussion about it last time. I mean, it really, I think, you know, I just know from working with local solar providers, it's one of the early things they kind of do is to generate a study based on actual exposure. And so my concern is that with a vertical face and the 45, you know, the angled top portion of the wall, and then this particular exposure, you know, can't we, you know, run a model? I would think a solar provider to kind of get that number, and I feel like we're starting to spin on moving forward on the wall based on National Grid stuff, where we might not even, if it's just not gonna work well and produce. I think that's what we really need to know.
So very quickly, I want to thank Maria. She just pulled up the rates. There's certainly a range between peak and off peak, but I just came up with $8,000 to $30,000 in electricity provided per year
Per year.
for a dollar value. If I might suggest, if there's to help move this forward, I recommend if Rich and I find that there's just not a good simple payback. If you're comfortable with staff just giving direction at that time to end that part of the design process, we can, or we can keep carrying it.
What do you think, Arthur?
Well, I guess we'll have the holidays coming up and, you know, we'll have a commission meeting in January. Hopefully, if you could have that information for us to
Yeah,
then kick that around.
I kind of like Maria coming right up that. I like.
I mean,
that.
I just am.
That's a good gun deck.
Maybe I may be mistaken. My concern is that particular exposure might not produce the amount of electricity to justify the project. And if that's the case, then I don't want to see things that are sort of hung up based on meetings with National Grid.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to accelerate.
Just
getting the wall
just
up there.
that study. What are
Yeah.
we looking at getting? Otherwise, let's move on from it. Or in fact, you know, there's a way that it might produce, then, you know, if we could talk about that in January, I'd really appreciate that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, continuing along on the topic of the sound barrier, I've reviewed the draft HMMH. HMMH is our acoustical subcontractor. technical report, so as the name indicates, it's technical, but the items that stood out to me. Is that the firm performed a directed modeling effort based off of our traffic, our site. And then specific for a 20-foot wall, they found that a 20-foot wall would reduce single event noise events by 2 to 13 decibels. When its range increases to 7 to 13 decibels for the 3 closest homes. And then a taller wall does not really increase that reduction at all. And then, as I mentioned, the next steps are to conclude the solar portion of design and move this to bid documents for fall construction.
So you're recommending a wall that high, not higher. And sounds like the solar component is a question, a big question. I think we should decide that as soon as we possibly can, because I'd like to finalize. I'd like to be able to show the public that we're accelerating this wall as quickly as we can. This is a public relations issue as much as a sound issue to me.
I think the burden is on staff and consultants January meeting to justify inclusion, and if we can't at that time, it should be.
Yeah, let's just go for a final in January. Would be a great idea.
Any other questions on the south ramp?
Okay, I'd like to recognize Cameron Woods, environmental coordinator for purpose of the PFAS investigation.
Hi, everyone. I just have a few updates today. We'll go over sampling, the status of home connections, as well as the disposal site boundary draft letter that is in your packet. We'll start with samples. Last week, there were 6 homes along Nobadeer, Monahanset, Okowa, and Skyline that were sampled by Weston Solutions. There were 4 additional homes that were scheduled to be sampled, but they were not due to well disconnection, winterization, and/or accessibility challenges reaching those properties. The results of those samples are not yet available, but the results of the September samples have already been distributed to all residents. For home status connection, there was just another one confirmed completed today. So as of today, there are 4 homes that have been connected: 25 Monahanset, 31 Monahanset, 1 Webster, and 50 Okowa. There are 8 homes that are in the process of being connected, and those vary in terms of where they are in the process. But they seem to be moving along pretty quickly, especially on 6 of those. There are 4 properties that we have not been able to get a hold of on MVR, Nobadeer, and Skyline. We've left voicemails and continue to try to reach out. Rob is the point person for that, so he'll stay vigilant on that one. The last thing that I wanted to go over is the disposal site boundary and the draft letters. If you are able to pull that up in your packet, Weston Solutions prepared a draft letter for residents within the airport's disposal site boundary, or DSB, for the purpose of this. The letter outlines the airport's work with Mass DEP and the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, or MCP. The letter is right now being going through the draft process. It's received edits from the airport staff, from council, and we find that it's in a pretty good position right now to be sent out to residents within the disposal site boundary who have not been connected to water yet. And the letters will include an explanation for why they are either being connected or not being connected to water during this round of hookups. And that letter, we'd appreciate review from the commission before we proceed with sending it out. I feel comfortable with it. I've reviewed it, edited it. I think that it's really important to get ahead of this because a lot of the issue with PFAS is this sort of shock value issue where residents don't know exactly what's happening. They're taken by surprise. They read things in the news, they read articles in N Magazine, like Mr. Muscarin was talking about, and they're just surprised. And so to be able to format this letter in a way that's really digestible, and I think really valuable for these residents to be aware of their specific standing within the disposal site boundary, I think that's really effective. So we would love any feedback from commission, and we can continue to workshop this letter, but I think it's in a pretty good position.
I don't like the term disposal site boundary. Any person reading that sounds like we're gonna dispose of a lot of PFAS inside a boundary line. We discussed this at the last meeting. It's not a very euphonious label. I don't know if we're required to use that label. Is that?
Yeah.
We are required to use it according to the MCP. It doesn't sound great, but it is necessary. It's very technical.
Ouch.
It isn't as scary as it actually may initially appear. It just means that the site at one point did dispose of these materials. And in this case, it was on the airport property, but it's expanded now. The disposal site boundary can shrink, it can change over time. And so we want to be transparent with residents that are in the boundary now, may fall out of the boundary later. But at this time, we just wanted to send this letter to those affected.
Who requires this language?
Jim, if you want to hop on, I believe it's Mass DEP through the MCP.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, thanks, Cameron. Yeah, a couple clarifications. Yeah, disposal site is a legal term that's included in the MCP. So that's why we're using that specific term. What we tried to do in response to your input from the last commission meeting was to provide a definition, add kind of a more of a folksy definition in the letter. So we try to do that. So take a look at that and see if that is helpful at all to try and soften that. But we are kind of stuck with that term. I'm sorry, what was the second part of that question?
That was that was my inquiry right there. If we're stuck with that term,
Yeah.
I'm just suggesting you get set for some blowback on that locally.
Yeah.
I think that's very unfortunate.
Yeah, it's we run into this in several states. Actually, in Connecticut, it's even worse. They refer to contamination as pollution and polluted soil. And so, we struggle with that with when we're dealing with the public as well. So it's not a unique situation for Massachusetts. I would like to just remind everyone though that these letters were actually required to be sent out along with the phase 2. So we're a bit behind the 8 ball here as we've been kind of going back and forth with the language. So we really do want to try and expedite this to the extent that we can and kind of get these letters finalized and out so that we're in compliance with the regulations.
Then let's send them out. That's fine.
Yeah, I appreciate the extra, effort and trying to fine tune it, I think, through 3 or 4 iterations, and I'm okay with this as
Yeah.
it is.
Great, we'll go ahead and send those out. Thank you.
And Ms. Woods, did you have anything further or just available for questions?
Available for questions, nothing further to add.
Anybody have any questions?
No.
I had one, which is, what is the status of the monitoring well installation that had been previously discussed in some of the right of ways?
That's a great question. We had worked with the town to see if we were able to hook into some of their wells that had already been located along Monahans and Lovers Lane, but we found out 2 months ago that we were unable to hook up to those because they were ultimately going to be taken out when the road work was completed along Monahans, and so those were rendered obsolete. We went back to Weston and they are working. I believe they have all of their locations approved now. They went through multiple iterations of figuring out where they could install these wells, but I can double check with Weston where they stand on that and circle back to you. But I believe that locations have been approved and they're now organizing installation.
Yeah, I believe we actually, if I can jump in, we have a date. The driller is scheduled to install those wells. I believe it's mid-December. December 18th, I believe is when that's occurring.
Great.
So
And
yeah, there was a lot of back and forth with the town. One thing we didn't want to do is install these wells. They're not going to, they're not inexpensive, and we didn't want them to get destroyed during the ensuing road modifications that the town is going to be doing. So there was a lot of back and forth with them, but we believe we've got the locations all squared away now so that they won't be in the way of the future construction.
Thank you. And 2 more follow-ups. Those will have tamper resistant lids of some sort tops?
Absolutely, yeah, they'll all be locked.
And would we be able to get a map of those approved locations when you have a chance, please?
Yes.
Absolutely, yep.
Thanks for your work on that. That was all I had. Anyone
Okay.
else? Okay, we want to move on, I think, then to crew quarters, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Cameron. For the crew quarters project update, the foundation has been poured. For the next 2 to 3 week look ahead, the contractor will be waterproofing the foundation. I believe they're performing a partial backfill and lifts as specified and based off of the results of the testing of the concrete pours to ensure that they meet specification. So under slab prep and plumbing will also occur, as well as the installation of the retaining walls. We are also expecting one more change order to address the delayed costs that we experienced this fall, and I'll have more information on that for the next meeting. And we are still on track for a July occupancy. Any questions before I move on to the terminal?
No.
So for the terminal project, I'm working with McFarland Johnson and Fennick McCready to begin scoping a lesser design effort that will evaluate and modify or remove the terminal geothermal system, update the tent, and consider common use IT systems for airline functions in the terminal. The program definition document is a good jumping off point for that effort, and I'll have further updates as we move forward on that design process. You should see a future task order, a commission meeting for evaluation related to that.
How much money do we expect to expend on this kind of redesign downscoping operation?
Rich might want to answer after. Right now, I would just be throwing estimates at it because we haven't done the scoping portion.
You know, I'm just concerned about spending a lot of money and then not ending up with any product.
Well, the flip side, if I may, of that coin is we already spent a lot of money and we've got this study, so what can we, I think, recognize as a benefit out of what was spent with an incremental, reasonably incremental additional expense?
We're gonna look in the basement for using some of that space. Was that part of this?
I don't think so. I think that part had sort of been
We forgot.
investigated by McCready and MJ, and then we headed into a different set of preferred alternatives, and now we would be looking to pick the I think, I don't want to call it low hanging fruit, but the recommendations that the manager made in the last meeting for pieces of the project at the lower cost, right?
So my approach to this sort of work, it's sort of, I'll borrow a phrase from the previous airport manager, it's the bucket approach. You know, I don't know what the final design effort would be, but 25% of that is just a fixed cost to mobilize people to look at something. And then we have 3 scope components, you know, 25% of design costs. We'll probably be evaluating the geothermal system and its replacement, another 25% for the common IT systems, and another 25% of design for the tent. So for better or for worse, the time spent and the design effort spent, half of it will be for something we know we want to or have to do, which would be fixing for whatever solution is going to exist for the geothermal system.
In your view, what's the most important? Is the geothermal rework the most important of those 3 things?
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah, okay. That's certainly worth looking at.
Anything else on the terminal? So rates and charges. Overview.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And so for the record, our public hearing on rates and charges is scheduled for the January commission meeting. And what I'm presenting to you here is just a staff update of the items we plan to bring to that meeting. So that way, by providing the commission with a sort of sneak peek, they can look at these items and say, well, we don't know if we like that, or you haven't included this item. Could you please prepare something along the lines of X, Y or Z
Mhm.
for that January meeting. So I am going to work through that document pretty quickly. I'm just going to go through the major items
Good.
in bullet form that we are considering for that meeting. I'm not going to have Billy share that document. But we're suggesting a 3.5% increase overall for our landing and ramp fees. That's equivalent to the previous year's CPI-W. What does the W stand for? The previous year's consumer price index,
Right.
3.5%. So we'll carry that through much of our rates and charges document. For the signatory airline group, which is currently only Cape Air, we also have a practice where we increase the reduction through a percentage multiplier to our signatory carriers. So the rate increases don't hit them as hard. It's like, I haven't run that calculation yet, but we'll likely increase that exemption from 62% to 60%. So I did mention that 3.5% increase will also take to all of the ramp and remain overnight fees. This year's Leo law service assessments will increase both in line with our contract value with the police department and what we've seen in schedule. We've tended towards longer days, long shifts. So I think those costs will be going up from 20-some cents to 40-some cents per plane passenger. For small, single, and light twins under 6,000 pounds, transient general aviation operations, again, that's transient general aviation operations, will go from $6 to $7. All of our tie-down fees will also increase by 3.5%. I'm going to spend just a couple minutes discussing the hangar fee rentals. Mr. Cheney came in a few months ago to express his case. I think Preston and I discussed, and I gave you my opinion that Mr. Cheney, I think, is correct on the side of the argument that while he has a small sport jet or a light jet, it's just that it's light, it's small. He shouldn't necessarily bear the fee charges that are in our current rates and charges. So we looked at this for a long time. The existing methodology charged more to aircraft with turboprops over piston props, more to jet engines, more to multiple engines, because traditionally those were a really good arbiter of weight, and most airports charge based on weight. But increasingly, two things have happened. We've managed our hangars to try to put as many people in as possible, so space is a premium. We're not really worried about weight bearing capacity of that pavement, so we should manage those hangars for overall size of an aircraft. If you draw a box around length and wingspan, that's a useful term. The other is that the industry has put out a lot more lighter turboprop and light jets since that rate methodology. So we spent some time with this, and while we wanted to stay away from administering a length and width formula, this really is the best way to do it. So we took our existing rates, we set our base rate based on the dimensions for a Cessna 172, which is a small single aircraft, 36 feet in wingspan, 27 feet long. That's 972 feet squared. So we set a fixed charge for that, and then an additional charge per square foot. And we actually rounded the Cessna 172 up to 1,000 square feet. And then we did some modeling. We picked 75 cents per additional foot squared. We looked at that. We modeled 50 cents. We modeled $1. That work is in the packet, and there are always winners and losers when you do this kind of work. But from staff level, we feel it's the most efficient way to recover costs, and that's what we're going to bring to rates and charges here. In the document, I forgot to redline it, but we'll also increase the T-hanger rents by 3.5% as well. The service hours for de-icing, we're changing the hours for our callback fee. The shift ends at 11, so if we call someone in at 11, we end up paying overtime. So anything after 10, we'll charge accordingly. And then the mail rate, we will increase that by a penny. I don't think that's a major cost item for the carrier. I did reach out to Cape Air. They have the mail contract. But what I'm looking for them to advise is an economic argument. If it's significant and there's a different day that they, or month of the year, they renegotiate their freight contracts. I'm willing to listen to that and, you know, belay that rate change, and so that's appropriate. Okay, so if there are any questions on that or items that the commission thinks we should take another look at and have ready in January, we are happy to answer questions and discuss.
Cape Air is really the only outfit that lands there that discusses or seems worried about what we're charging here. Is that true?
I'd agree with that.
So, you know, I'm all for raising rates and charges. You know, but we do need Cape Air here. I think rightfully treating them as sort of a separate item is probably a good idea. We certainly need to have Cape Air here, but as far as rates and charges for larger private jets or commercial, nobody ever complains about what our rates and charges are. It seems to me they just show up, pay and leave.
I would urge caution that it's very important that we're non-discriminatory in our
Oh,
approach
absolutely.
to setting these.
Absolutely.
And while Cape Air as a year-round signatory gets a certain rate, any other operator that wanted to provide that same service would be eligible for that same rate too.
Sure.
And so I know what you're saying, but I just think that it's very important that it's not targeted to an individual operator, but to a class of operator. And we actually would very much welcome, I don't want to say that publicly, you know, another signatory operator at that for that, you know, that
Sure.
same to provide that year-round service. So just to be clear, it's not really just about one carrier so much as it is a class of carriers.
Yes. Agreed.
I'm okay with the draft. May have, you know, other comments based upon input that we received from the public hearing. It's the purpose of having it. So I think as a starting point, it looks good, and I look forward to receiving input, you know, from the public, and then deliberating based on the public hearing.
Good, thank you. Shall we move forward?
Yes, please.
Okay, I have two tenant alteration applications on here. I'll take them both together. So I'm working with GJ Smith on their tenant alteration application. However, we both recently learned that the utility work involved, which is relocating a water line, would be of a longer duration and more comprehensive disruption than we previously understood. So I've indicated that to Mr. Smith that while the airport, you know, would of course work with him on the facility that's impacted, which is our SRE. Really it's water supply for the restrooms, and we would have to have a fire watch for the sprinkler system being down. There are additional tenants on that line that I'd expect the tenant to develop a plan with those impacted facilities. But the duration of an outage could be 3 to 5 days. And, you know, obviously we both learned about this at the same point, so we're, you know, responding accordingly. So I have not approved that alteration application because I want to make sure that those you know, other affected parties are okay with the work. The other application that we've processed and we have approved is one for Island Road Materials or Victor Brandon. This is for modifications to the asphalt batching plant, specifically the bin and feed system. We've approved this, but you know, my understanding at this time is that it's a permissive action. It's not imminently going to go forward. The tenant is evaluating the improvements, but may not take this forward. We're okay with the work, so we signed off on it, but it may not actually. Questions on either application?
Questions on either application? I had one, Mr. Carver, which is there's a bit of a conflict between the two. GJ Smith has submitted 2 applications, and he's got a hand drafted drainage plan with 2 leach pits. And then he's got the plan that was approved by the planning board and the other application by his engineer, which has 10 leach pits and an oil grit separator. I'm not saying he has to do that or that but I just think that, the airport approving a tenant alteration application should be cautious to have creating an approval that conflicts with you know, where we're substituting an approval that basically, would say, you know, that this altered drainage is appropriate. If our engineers, whether we wanted to have MJ look at it and or if he went to the planning board, I just don't like the conflict between the two, applications, both related to the drainage and one signed by an engineer and one is,
Alright, so
maybe we just clarify that.
I will clarify that, and I'll also note that the tenant did drop off to me a revised tenant alteration application today that I haven't reviewed.
Great.
So we will
I'm not opposed,
certainly,
I just don't wanna have a conflict that we create. Thank you.
welcome.
A question, is Smith, easy to deal with? I remember for a while, we had a little issue with him. How's that going? Is he following the instructions of the planning board? Is he easy to deal with?
Yeah, well, so we're working together.
Okay,
You
you
know,
find
amicably to-
that's
to get
settled
past
down a
this.
little bit?
Moving on.
Okay, I'll move into my manager's report. So starting with our funded projects for the master plan, I'll spend just a couple of moments on this. We held our TAC meeting on Monday, and this was to review the runway 624 alternatives. The group recommended a future shift in runway 624 to accommodate, you know, future erosion on the south shore. In short, it would be abandoning approximately 400 feet on the south end and adding that to the north end, but keeping the existing runway orientation and keeping the existing declared distances of 6,300 feet of usable runway line, 6,303. We will look forward to holding a second public meeting similar to the first. So this would be an afternoon, late afternoon, early evening terminal with a number of poster boards, staff and consultant and refreshments, milling around, engaging the public, walking them through the project. You know, some commissioners attended our first meeting. This would be really a repeat of the second. Same concept for the second. The date is to be determined, but I believe, you know, sort of mid to late January would be the most likely date range. I'm also working with McFarland Johnson for sort of an in-person narrative or summary report for the commission to come before the commission and have that be accepted. You know, this was our third TAC meeting. It's been I don't want to say a long process because it's been an appropriate length process, but you know, the commission should be in a position to review not only the facility inventory, but the environmental and community aspects of the planning, which were mostly contained in the first meeting as well. So I'll work with our consultant group and we'll bring that forward to the commission. I do also want to make a note. I think we've benefited from having the Surfside Association in the TAC meeting group, and their recommendation, which I agreed to in the meeting, was to have staff attend their next summer meeting to present the results of the master plan update. And presumably I will not be the one to attend and present at that meeting, so I'll carry it forward and put it in the record so someone else can attend. For the geometry project DBE update, I erroneously reported last month that the DBE plan was approved. That's incorrect. It was submitted to the FAA and they are reviewing it, but it is not yet approved. Our ARF truck, we are still planning a January, February delivery date. I think we're sending our mechanic, and I'm not sure who we're sending from our ARF department, but we usually send them to Oshkosh for field training on delivery of any new piece of ARF equipment. The technology moves a lot faster on these trucks than it did 10 and 15 years ago. No update on the continued environmental monitoring. For the PFAS mitigation grants, we're finalizing the scope with the FAA and drafting the sole source letter. And what I mean by that is the firm Aquagua is the sole source firm that can provide the technology. It's called HALT, or hydrothermal alkaline treatment. And anytime in a federally issued grant, when you're using a technology or a process that only one person controls, you do document this in the sole source letter, which takes just a little bit of additional time. For our MIPA NEPA updates, we held a scoping meeting with the FAA and DOT. We also had an informal meeting through the consultant with the MIPA staff. A major item we were waiting on was the direction from the airport master plan TAC reading committee on the runway 624 alternative to include in that scope. We now have that alternative. It's the shift. So we can move forward with that. But the reason that's important is that this is an FAA planning grant, and those grants cannot be amended. We can only issue another grant, which takes time and draws a project out. So it's especially important to receive clear guidance from NEPA in this process for submission of the environmental notification form. Because the MEPA response then directs the items that we need to address in the environmental impact report. This is all required documentation. So the planning process, we don't want to undersell the amount of effort that we are anticipating in response to MEPA's issuance of the EIR. So that was a good meeting that the consultant had with MEPA, and I don't think it's a surprise. They continue to promote the state, the administration's goal in greenhouse gas accounting, energy consumption, and other environmental programs. So when you do see us bring that forward for our NEPA scope, my guess is it's going to seem like a lot of work, but it's generated in consultation with the state agency that we require. Ramp lighting. Staff have reviewed the draft scope from McFarland Johnson, and we've directed McFarland to provide additional design level of effort for alternatives related to modeling the pole height, the functionality, and the flexibility, as well as including a community scoping meeting, which is to be determined. Could be as part of regular commission meeting, it could be standalone. And we are moving forward with all lights. There's a figure in your packet that indicates those poles. 2.5 lights are ineligible and will be a sponsor cost. And my recommendation, I'm going to bring that forward. We'll just include them at the time. It just, at the end of the day, it changes the dynamics from a 90% and 5% funded grant to, I don't know, an 88 and a 4% funded grant. So the runway 624 centerline work, I apologize for the complexity in my report, but there are just a couple items that are a little different this time. We received one bid for that work. It was $300,000 above estimate. The FAA will fund this extra amount as eligible work, but we need to amend the grant. We will bring the contract with Victor Brandon to the commission in January, and it will need to be signed in January, or the contractor no longer needs to hold the bid for that amount of time. So the item that I need to execute and I need to figure out with staff in the interim is whether the town will accept our submitted application to the FAA as a funding commitment and sign the contract that we have the funds available, or if I will need to proceed with a home rule process, charter amendments, where we can raise capital through the select board. They're both fine processes with me. I'll defer to the town's finance department on which they see as being more appropriate. I lean conservatively towards the second one, and I'll take that forward. For non-AIP projects, housing for our townhouse development, I've recently revised and requested $4.95 million from Capcom. That's down from our original $6 million request. I think we really sharpen our pencils in consultation and going through the process with membership. We have a meeting Thursday, and I hope we have a positive outcome in that meeting. Hangar developments, we're working on the lease with Hagedorn Aviation for Hangar 8. Happy to report the fence relocation in the bunker is complete. That project took on a life of its own. We're really glad to have that work done. It's better for the airport, it's better for the tenants. Fence relocation on the South Shore. The FAA has come back with some comments that we need to resolve regarding marking the fence posts, possibly with obstruction lights and a potential change to our declared distances. I don't know that I really agree with their determination. It comes from a Washington office staffer who reviews these in bulk. So we've reached out to our region to just try to get more.
Where is that specifically?
It's the relocation of the South Shore Novadear Beach area perimeter fence and road.
And they want us to light the posts?
There are one or two posts that they indicated are an obstruction to one of our declared distances or one of our protected surfaces, and their response is put an obstruction light on a post.
Oh,
I disagree.
Okay.
I respectfully disagree, and we'll discuss.
Why do you disagree?
The
Are we talking a language difference here? Because it seems to me as a pilot, if you're coming in at night and you're coming, you're low and you hit a fence that's not lit up, that's a problem for us.
It raises the question of why not only the airport's fence isn't lit now, but why numerous other fences in the region in the same situation are not similarly lit.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's really a Nantucket issue. I think it's possibly possibly a misunderstanding.
Okay.
and then you're gonna have lighted fence posts along top of the coastal bank.
Yeah,
And so I don't want to get too far into the details, but the penetration of the fence post is 2 feet. It may be more appropriate to lower the fence by 2 feet and string 6 strands of barbed wire on a frangible coupling. And these are the kinds of conversations we want to have.
Okay, yeah, let's see what we can do.
okay.
But yeah, I want to avoid marking it for obstruction lighting as well as revising any declared distances. But it's an interesting challenge. The refueling pad wall repair, no update. I believe we've issued that, we made that notice of award and you've signed that contract. We did sign it. Okay. But we'll move forward with that and we'll have that done in time for the season. And then we're moving forward with the installation of the electric aircraft charging station. That will need an ALP update. We've submitted that to the FAA and I'm going to bring that to the commission in January. The ALP update to the commission in January. On the RFP bid status, we've awarded the RFP for the runway 624 center line. We've made the notice of award to Victor Brandon for the runway 624 center line work, the contract discussion that I had previously will follow. I'm going to list a few other items here that in the staff transition and the office manager, we haven't issued all of the procurement documents. I'd like to have a partial list here, not only for your update, but also as a record for the next manager. And also for the record, Billy keeps trying to get me to have this meeting. I keep bumping it because of other things that come up. But the items that we're discussing for issuing in the winter and not in any particular order. It's the RFP to lease 33 bunker. We're waiting on contract council comments. It's a request for expression of interest for the flat roof building previously occupied by Blade. RFQ for flight procedures for recharting our approaches and departures. Our annual airline leases, we are undertaking that currently. It's a new contract for 1200 Aero for our ramp management software. Part of that evaluation is jettisoning a contract that we would then not need. We don't need to accumulate these things like challenge coins. And then the RFP for design services for the townhouse. As soon as we have a positive indication from Capcom, I want to be able to release that.
Mr.
Yeah.
Colbert, just to clarify, the contract for the refueling pad is signed. That is the
Okay.
truck builders, yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry for the confusion.
No problem.
We are waiting on the contract number from the finance.
Okay, so we signed that, we brought that in the previous commission.
Yes, correct.
Thank you. Okay, any questions before I move to operations?
Yes, I think we lost Ms.
Ms.
Topham.
Topham.
So, I think we could call her and put it on speakerphone perhaps, and then be able to continue. I don't think it's probably, we haven't taken any action items. I think we need to maintain a quorum, so are you able to, or do you want me to, or
I don't know if you can give me the phone number. I don't have it.
right here, I have it, I can just do it.
Okay.
Fourth, I don't have any action items left.
No, she's back. Oh, she's back.
I am back.
Just in time. Okay, great. Thank you.
Sorry.
No worries. Thank you so much. Okay, I just want to make sure we do everything appropriately here.
Good-
Thank you.
Good call, Arthur.
That I need to agree on or not while I was,
We didn't take any action. We've just been listening to some updates, so you may want to review the video of the meeting for the few minutes that you didn't see.
I'm not gonna touch my iPad, so.
Hey, thank you. Go ahead, Dash Carver.
For the operations update, POTUS visit, I wanted to acknowledge the excellence and professionalism of staff in support of the Secret Service, Air Force, and other agency personnel during the president's visit. Everyone played a role, but I wanted to especially recognize Fred Wellington, Addison Falconer, Rob Holgate, and Joe Partida. Related, same time frame, the fence repair on Monahans Road, so approximately 2,200 local on Thursday, the 21st of November. The driver left Monahans Road, crashed through 150 feet of airport fence, rolled over and came to a stop. The driver was okay, but we were left with a mess and a security fence breach prior to the POTUS arrival. So I also wanted to recognize and thank airport staff. We had a full response within 15 minutes on a very rainy and cold Thursday night. Police department and fire department for securing the scene. Police department and airport staff, especially Mike for guarding the fence all night. Doug Lindley for his emergency response to contract temporary repairs the next day. Airport maintenance staff dropped everything they were doing as well and provided parts and labor to put the fence back. We're also noting our response costs and we'll take action to recover them as appropriate. Let's see, we had a slow Thanksgiving and a busy stroll. Thanksgiving was down 10% in fuel gallons and 7% in total sales. I think that's both due to weather and the impact from the TFR. Stroll, however, was up 23% in fuel gallons sold and 22% in sales. So as far as we've kept records, it was the most productive stroll that we've had. Our PCI inspection was planned to begin today. It's been rescheduled for the 12th to 13th. So Mass DOT Aeronautics, they perform a system-wide survey for airports in their system to update the Airport Pavement Condition Index. That's what the PCI stands for. The PCI values are then used to determine AIP funding eligibility for airport pavement projects. So I wanted to thank the DOT for continuing to provide this program.
They did start today.
They did.
So it's gonna take a break tomorrow and they'll start again on Thursday.
So they're physically here.
Yes.
The fuel farm work is complete, performed by, I'll say almost complete, performed by Mass Tank. The EDR passed, which is a new item regulated by DEP. One maintenance issue we have is a cover could not be replaced. I think it was fused to the section.
Yes.
So it will stay that way. It still operates, but we'll replace, repair this spring when it's more appropriate. Fuel reservations, we will create our ask soon in conjunction with our fuel provider and send to the steamship for next year's fuel deliveries. We had an aircraft incident. I don't have the date for you, but the wind blew an unsecured luggage cart across the ramp and very slowly into the leading left wing edge of a small business jet. So we're working through that claim and responsibility. In the meantime, we are emphasizing with staff controlling luggage carts, and we're building a rack to secure them. Flying Minnow is exercising their option to renew the concession lease in the tent. We're working with FAA Tech Ops for the runway 15 reels upgrade. Their work plan will involve saw cutting the pavement across the taxi lane access on the south side of T hangars. This is certainly acceptable for the work. We'll just have to work with approximately, I'm guessing 10 to 12 tenants who could be impacted with either a short-term relocation or an alternate taxi route. And then our FAA inspection is scheduled for May 27th through 29th of 2025. Questions before I move into statistics?
Do we know how much insurance this guy that rammed into our fence has? In other words, that sounds like a big cost.
So our property insurance deductible is $20,000. I think we will be near or below that. So we're talking with airport council about the appropriate way to recover those
Oh, yeah,
costs.
I think we need a lawsuit on that one, for sure.
Well, hopefully not.
Well, hopefully he'll agree.
So let's see what we can
He'll
do,
agree.
right? Like,
But, you know,
Mhm.
it'd be nice to see that he's well insured.
Yeah, I'll say I'm with you, you know, this was a major incident for us, we have costs, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna proceed aggressively.
We have big
to cover our
costs there.
Statistics.
Please.
Okay, for October, operations are up 17%, year to date, we're up 3%. Southwest ramp operations were up 14% in October over last year. Employments were up 20% and we're up 10% on the year to date. Cape Air for October was up 37% in Boston, 27% in New Bedford, 6% in the Vineyard, and 297% in Hyannis. So that's 568 in-plane passengers in October versus 143 October previous. So it's the 8th month of over 200% growth in that market. JetBlue, October was in the last month of our seasonal operators, so we only have JetBlue reporting, and then we'll be pretty quiet for the winter. Boston and DCA were both up 31%, White Plains was down 5%, JFK up 2%, LaGuardia down 9%. Fuel overall, Jet A is up 2% on the fiscal year to date over the 3-year average, down 13.5% over the previous 3-month average, and down 20% for November. If you just look at the FBO, we're up 7.3% over that 3-year average, down 3.1 for the previous 3-month average, and down 20% for November. Commercially, again, declines are going to be more pronounced based on timing, and then these will fall off until our commercial season restarts in the spring. We're down 8.3% on the fiscal year to date. 53% over the previous 3 months, and then the season's over, so the month over month doesn't apply. LOLAD is up 9.7% on the fiscal year, 13.7% over the 3-month average for October, or for November, and then down 5.5% for the previous November 3-year average. Freight was down 27% in October, and it's down 19% year to date. Cape Air Freight and FedEx were down, mail and UPS were up. We had 3 noise calls in October, all from 1 resident. For the APU log summary in October, we logged 6 entries. They were all initial warnings with compliance. We didn't have to issue any second warnings. For personnel, Elizabeth Bruce has accepted the position of administrative assistant. You'll recognize Elizabeth as she's moving over from the FBO. That date will be January 6th. We've received 13 applicants for our subsequently open FBO position. So I'm pleased to report we'll interview a number of qualified candidates, and we'll probably have a tough decision to make soon. We have an open maintenance position, M1. We are working to fill that. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions on the manager's report?
No.
Ms. Topham?
No,
Thanks. Commissioner's comment. Ms. Topham?
no,
No?
Karen? I just had a couple. I just wanted to expand on the manager's report about the capital program committee. Express my thanks to staff who have been to put quite a bit of time into this project related to the townhouse. I also have sat through many hours of meetings. I'm hopeful, cautiously optimistic that we can obtain a positive recommendation from them. A lot of questions concerning costs, but also airport planning related to housing, as well as taking the time to explain some of the regulatory climate the airport faces with respect to the ability to provide housing for, other groups besides for the airport personnel. It's been a bit of a time consuming process, but I understand, where they're coming from. And, hope that at Thursday's meeting with some of the revisions, and really good work the staff has done. On top of all the other things, sort of something that's just popped up, that we can, get that hopeful positive recommendation and then perhaps the finance committee process might go a little smoother. So I just wanted to mention it. It's been quite a bit of a time, commitment in the last few weeks. As an update to, the commission, the manager search, the, preliminary screening committee met last week and we've narrowed it to 5 candidates. ADK is working through the next step of their process, which they call, I think, the long form interviews. And then the preliminary screening committee will meet again, most likely before the holiday, which of course will be a posted meeting, so everyone's aware of it, but then we will enter executive session and then ideally be back to the commission in January with some finalists to review. So the process is proceeding and I believe going well. So I just wanted to give you all an update on that. I do want to mention that large puddle on Monahans Road is in conjunction with that accident. I did have a discussion with a brief discussion with the DPW director. The town is working on the design of the road improvements that really have to do with all of Monahans Road, but I'm hopeful that that they can advance that. I see that as the airport being the adjacent property owner. It's really, and for a lot of years, I think there was claims made with respect to the airport contributing runoff to that. The South Ramp project really focused, and I know the engineers really and staff worked to be sure to make some, I guess we would call it micro grading, fine tune adjustments to be sure that there's not runoff that's leaving airport property. So I do think it's something we have to keep an eye on and work cooperatively with the town, but I think it's important that should staff have meetings with the town about any, that it's known that it's something that we hope can be advanced, because I think, as I said, as the adjacent property owner there, it's really becoming a bit of I think it's a bit more than a nuisance. And so basically what's happening, of course, is that especially in the freezing weather, the cars drag the water up and down these hills on both sides. It's hazardous. So hopefully I know they recognize it, but they've got a lot of competing interests, but I think it's one that for the airport has an interest in as well. So I just wanted to mention that. That's all I have. I would entertain, if there's nothing further, a motion to enter executive session per general law, chapter 30A, section 21A, to review the executive session minutes enumerated on the agenda, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Walsh, and to discuss strategy with respect to pursuing legal claims against the manufacturer of PFAS and other potential sources of PFAS, both of which, where the chair has determined an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the airport commission, not to return to open session. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second,
Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
second, oh, yeah, hey,
Thank you.
I want to make sure you got my vote.
Thank you. And Ms. Muscari?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you all. Thank you everyone who attended. Good night.
Brandon.
Thanks.